Let me start with a hard truth most people don't want to hear. If you've been chasing superfoods for years buying powders, capsules, imported berries, exotic roots, there's a good chance you've been overpaying for underperformance. I'm not saying those foods are useless. Some are genuinely good. But after years of testing, comparing nutrient panels, digging into public health data, and watching hype cycles come and go, I've learned something uncomfortable. The most powerful foods are often the least marketed. And the one we're talking about today? It's not trendy. It's not exotic. And because of that, almost nobody talks about it. Here's what makes this video different. I'm not pulling this from a blog list or a supplement label. I'm pulling this from the same framework used by public health researchers, the kind that doesn't care about vibes, influencers, or price tags. It only cares about nutrient density. Not has vitamins, not contains antioxidants, but how much essential nutrition you get per calorie. That distinction changes everything. Most people think they eat healthy because they recognize the foods they're buying. Spinach, kale, broccoli, maybe blueberries if they're feeling fancy. I used to think the same way. But when you actually put these foods side by side using standardized scoring systems, some sacred cows fall apart fast. Foods we've been told are elite end up mid-tier. Others quiet, overlooked, almost boring completely dominate the rankings. I want you to think about how nutrition advice usually works. It's brand-driven, or trend-driven, or culture-driven. Rarely is it math-driven. Rarely is it cost-aware. And almost never is it framed around efficiency. But if you're someone who actually cares about getting the most nutrition for your time, money, and effort, efficiency is the only metric that matters long-term. Years ago, I started asking a simple question. If calories are the cost of eating, which foods give the highest return on that cost? Not in theory, on paper, with real data. That question led me into nutrient profiling systems used by epidemiologists, not influencers. One of the most important of these is a nutrient density index developed using guidance from major public health bodies in the United States. Now, quick clarification, because accuracy matters. The CDC doesn't publish lifestyle blogs or superfood lists. What they do support and reference are nutrient density frameworks used to guide dietary recommendations. One of the most well-known analyses using this framework evaluated dozens of fruits and vegetables based on how well they delivered key nutrients relative to calories. Vitamins A, C, K, several B vitamins, minerals like potassium and calcium scored objectively. When I first saw the top-ranked result from that analysis, I didn't believe it. I assumed it was a statistical fluke or some technicality. So I did what I always do. I double-checked it against raw nutrient data, then against preparation methods, then against real-world availability. And the result held up every single time. What shocked me wasn't just that this plant ranked number 1. It was how wide the gap was between it and everything else. This wasn't a photo finish. This was domination. But before I tell you what it is, you need to understand why most people miss it. First problem, visibility. This plant doesn't have a supplement industry behind it. You don't see ads for it during podcasts. There's no billion-dollar powder brand sponsoring athletes with it. That alone should tell you something. In my experience, the louder the marketing, the lower the nutritional efficiency per dollar. That's not always true, but it's true often enough to notice the pattern. Second problem, culinary bias. This plant doesn't fit neatly into modern American cooking habits. It's not sweet. It's not neutral. It has a personality. And foods with strong flavor profiles tend to get pushed to the margins unless a culture actively builds dishes around them. When that cultural memory fades, so does the food. Third problem, and this one matters a lot of nutrition conversations. Focus on individual nutrients instead of nutrient density. Someone says, this has protein, or that has antioxidants, and the discussion stops there. But density asks a harder question. How much nutrition are you getting relative to how much energy you reconsuming? If your goal is health, longevity, or metabolic efficiency, density beats raw quantity every time. This is where leafy greens usually enter the conversation, and yes, leafy greens are generally excellent. But even within that category, the spread is enormous. Some are good. Some are great, and one is in a league of its own. Here is another insider detail most people don't realize until they've vet-tracked this stuff for years. Nutrient density isn't just about what is present. It's about what is consistently present across multiple nutrients. A food that is extremely high in one vitamin but mediocre in everything else doesn't score well. The top scorers are broad-spectrum performers. They don't spike, they dominate quietly across the board. I tested this plant in multiple ways: raw, lightly cooked, blended, and paired with different fats to improve absorption. I compared satiety, taste fatigue, and how easy it was to integrate into daily meals. Because data alone doesn't matter if people won't eat the food more than once. And this is where things got interesting. Most health foods fail at sustainability. People tolerate them briefly. They force them into routines, then they burn out. This one behaved differently. When prepared correctly, and that is a big I'll get into later, it wasn't just tolerable. It was craveable in a subtle way. Peppery, fresh, clean. The kind of flavor your body doesn't fight. At this point, some of you are probably guessing. Others are thinking, if this thing is so good, why don't doctors talk about it? And that's a fair question. The answer is boring but important. Clinical nutrition focuses on deficiencies and disease states, not optimization. If a population isn't deficient in something, it rarely becomes a talking point, even if improvement would benefit almost everyone. This plant doesn't fix a single dramatic deficiency. It improves everything slightly at once. And paradoxically, that makes it less visible in a system that rewards dramatic interventions over quiet consistency. Let me pause here and ask you something, because I'm genuinely curious. Have you ever discovered a food that completely outperformed the hype foods you were told to buy? Something cheap, local, almost hidden? Drop it in the comments. I read those, and some of the best insights I've ever found came from viewers, not headlines. Now, before the reveal, there's one more misconception we need to clear up. Nutrient density does not mean eat only this. Anyone telling you that is either uninformed or selling something. Density is about leverage. It's about stacking the deck in your favor with foods that do more work per bite. Think of this plant as a nutritional multiplier, not a replacement. Before we name anything, we need to talk about how foods are judged when marketing is stripped away. Because once you understand the scoring system, the outcome becomes almost unavoidable. This is the part most videos skip, not because it's boring, but because it doesn't flatter the usual winners. The nutrient density framework used in the CDC-referenced analysis doesn't reward extremes. It rewards balance. Specifically, it looks at how much of a defined set of essential nutrients a food delivers per 100 calories. That's important. Calories are the limiter. Everyone has a ceiling on how much they can eat. So foods that deliver more nutrition before you hit that ceiling are objectively more efficient. The nutrients evaluated aren't random. We're talking about vitamins A, C, and K. Several B vitamins like folate. Minerals such as calcium, iron, potassium, and magnesium. Plus fiber and protein contribution. A food doesn't need to dominate every category, but it needs to show up consistently across most of them to rank at the top. This is where a lot of healthy foods quietly lose ground. Take spinach, for example. Excellent food. I eat it regularly. But spinach spikes extremely high in a few areas, vitamin K, folate, and then drops off in others. It's strong, but narrow. Same story with kale. Massive vitamin A and C numbers, but once you normalize for calories and breadth, the score compresses. Then there's broccoli, another solid performer. More balanced than people give it credit for. But again, it's middle of the pack once you line everything up side by side. Here's the key insight most people miss. The top-ranked plant doesn't win by being extreme. It wins by being everywhere. Moderate to high levels of almost every nutrient that matters with very low caloric cost. That's a rare profile, and it's not just the vitamins. Let's talk minerals for a moment, because this is where things get even more interesting. Calcium is usually associated with dairy. Iron with red meat or legumes. Potassium with bananas. But when you actually run the numbers per calorie, some leafy plants quietly outperform all of those categories simultaneously, not individually, collectively. Now, I want to be precise here. Bioavailability matters. Just because a nutrient is present doesn't mean you absorb all of it. That's where preparation comes in, and it's also where a lot of people accidentally sabotage themselves. Raw isn't always better. Overcooked is almost always worse. Light cooking, especially steaming, can improve the availability of certain nutrients while preserving others. Fat pairing dramatically improves absorption of fat-soluble vitamins like A and K. This isn't theory. It's been replicated repeatedly. When I tested this plant raw versus lightly cooked, the difference wasn't subtle. Raw, it delivered sharp flavor and high vitamin C. Lightly cooked, it lost some vitamin C as expected, but became significantly easier to absorb in terms of minerals and fat-soluble vitamins when paired with olive oil or eggs. That's another reason this plant scores so high in real-world use. It's versatile across preparation methods without collapsing nutritionally. Let's address fiber briefly, because it's one of the most misunderstood components of nutrition. People chase fiber grams without considering density. A food can have a lot of fiber per serving but still be inefficient per calorie. The top-ranked plant delivers meaningful fiber without forcing you to overeat calories to get it. That matters for gut health and metabolic control. Protein is another area where people get confused. No, this plant is not a protein powerhouse in absolute terms. It's not replacing meat, eggs, or legumes. But per calorie, its protein contribution is surprisingly high for a leafy green. Again, efficiency, not dominance. Here's something else that surprised me during testing: satiety. You wouldn't expect a low-calorie leafy plant to affect satiety much, but it does, especially when combined with fats or proteins. There's a qualitative fullness that goes beyond calorie math. Part of that is fiber. Part of it is micronutrient sufficiency. When your body gets what it needs, cravings drop. Anyone who's experimented with nutrient-dense eating long enough recognizes this pattern. Now let's talk cost, because this is where the conversation becomes uncomfortable for the supplement industry. This plant delivers more micronutrients per dollar than almost anything you can buy fresh. No capsules, no powders, no shipping from the other side of the world. In many regions, it's cheaper than lettuce. That alone should make you skeptical of why it's not constantly promoted. And no, it's not because it's too good to be true. It's because it's not monetizable at scale. You can't patent it. You can't brand it easily. And it doesn't create recurring purchases beyond normal food consumption. That's not a conspiracy, that's economics. At this point in my own research journey, I stopped asking, is this the most nutrient-dense plant? And started asking, why wouldn't it be? It thrives in simple environments, it grows fast. It concentrates nutrients efficiently. And it doesn't rely on sweetness or starch to be palatable, which means it doesn't trade nutrition for calories. Let me throw a question to you here, because this is where community insight gets interesting. When you think of leafy greens, which ones do you actually enjoy eating consistently, not just tolerate? Drop that below. Enjoyment is an underrated variable in nutrition success. One more thing before we move on. Rankings don't mean exclusivity. The foods below the top spot are still excellent. This isn't about tearing down spinach or kale. It is about recognizing that one plant quietly outperforms them when judged by the same rules, and that most people never notice, because no one explains the rules. Alright, if you stayed with me this far, you already know this isn't going to be something exotic, expensive, or newly discovered, and that's the point. The most nutrient-dense plant evaluated in the CDC-referenced nutrient density analysis is watercress. Not a supplement, not a powder, not a berry flown in from halfway across the world. Watercress. When I first saw it at the top of the list, my reaction wasn't excitement, it was skepticism. Watercress has been around forever. It's not rare, it's not difficult to grow, and it's often treated like a garnish if it's used at all. That alone should make you pause. Because in nutrition, when something old, common, and inexpensive outperforms everything else on a standardized public health metric, it's usually not because of hype. It's because the math is uncomfortably clear. So how did we get here? How does the highest scoring plant in a formal nutrient density framework end up nearly invisible in modern food conversations? The short answer is cultural drift. Watercress used to be common in traditional diets, especially in Europe and parts of the United States. It grew naturally in clean streams and was valued for its sharp, fresh taste. But as food systems industrialized, preferences shifted toward crops that were easier to transport, store, and standardize. Watercress is delicate. It wilts quickly. It doesn't ship like iceberg lettuce. And in a system optimized for shelf life, that's a problem. Another factor is flavor. Watercress isn't mild, it's peppery, slightly bitter, and assertive. Modern palates trained on sweetness and neutrality often misinterpret that as too strong. But from years of eating and testing nutrient-dense foods, I can tell you this. Strong flavor often correlates with phytochemical richness. Your taste buds aren't broken. They're being challenged. Let's ground this again in accuracy. Watercress ranked highest in the CDC-referenced analysis because it delivered near-complete coverage of the evaluated nutrients at extremely low caloric cost. Vitamins A, C, and K, strong. Calcium and iron, present in meaningful amounts. Folate, solid. Fiber, efficient. And it did this without leaning on sugar or starch. This doesn't mean it's a miracle food. It means it's an exceptional baseline food. Something you can add regularly, cheaply, and sustainably to improve overall nutrient intake without re-engineering your diet. Now let's talk about how people mess this up, because they do. Mistake number 1, treating watercress like lettuce. It's not. If you use it as a neutral salad base, you'll probably hate it. That peppery bite needs balance. Acid helps. Fat helps. Protein helps. When paired correctly, watercress doesn't overpower, it sharpens. Mistake number 2, overcooking it. Watercress cooks fast, very fast. Long cooking times will destroy vitamin C and flatten the flavor. If you're cooking it, think seconds, not minutes. Or add it at the very end of a dish, like you would with fresh herbs. Mistake number 3, assuming more is better. You don't need massive servings. Because it's dense, small amounts go a long way. This is where efficiency shows up in real life. A handful used well can outperform a bowl of lower density greens. Here's how I actually use it, week to week. I rotate it into salads mixed with milder greens. I add it to eggs at the very end of cooking. I blend small amounts into savory smoothies, not fruit-heavy ones, but protein-forward blends with fats to support absorption. And sometimes, honestly, I just use it as a flavor accent, the way people use arugula. That's another quiet detail worth mentioning. Watercress is in the same botanical family as arugula and mustard greens. If you enjoy those, watercress won't feel alien. It'll feel familiar, just more concentrated. Now let's clear up a common myth. Some people worry about oxalates or goitrogens in leafy greens. Context matters. Watercress contains compounds common to cruciferous vegetables, but in normal dietary amounts. For healthy individuals, this is not a practical concern. If anything, the broader body of evidence suggests cruciferous vegetables are associated with positive health outcomes, not negative ones. As always, if someone has a specific medical condition, they should tailor accordingly, but for the general population, fear here is largely overblown. Another reason watercress doesn't get attention is that it doesn't make dramatic promises. It won't detox you. It won't melt fat. It won't fix everything in 30 days. What it does is far more boring and far more powerful. It quietly raises the floor of your nutrition, day after day, meal after meal. And that's why it works. Let me ask you one last thing, because this matters more than rankings. What foods do you actually stick with over time? The best nutrition plan isn't the most impressive one, it's the one you repeat. If watercress fits your taste and routine, it's a rare case where the data and real life line up cleanly. So here's the takeaway. If you care about nutrient density, efficiency, and evidence, not trends, watercress deserves a place in your rotation. Not as a headline, not as a miracle, as a tool. A very effective one. Remember, it's not about eating perfectly. It's about stacking small advantages where they actually matter. And sometimes the most powerful advantage is hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to look past the noise. If this breakdown helped you see nutrition a little differently, consider subscribing. The next video dives into other overlooked foods that score far higher than their reputation and why our food culture keeps missing them. Because once you learn how to read the scorecard, you stop chasing hype and you start eating with intent.